I'm Doc Issues from Capes on the Couch, a show that examines the mental health issues of comic book characters, part of the GonnaGeek network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other amazing geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to episode 293 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we continue our podcast media host discussion talking about Transistor.
But first, in this week's Better Podnerings, topics include more podcast media host criteria, another Apple Podcast search update, and I have digital plugin loyalty?
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we have more fun feedback from the Better Podcasting Discord server, including making it 4 in a row.
Lauren, start the show now.
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
This is episode 293 of Better Podcasting. I am Steven, and of course, you know he's here. He's the one that you actually care for. He's SP.
Don't worry, folks, I did not go blind. I can see just fine. I used my Eclipse glasses a couple of days ago. We're good to go. And boy, if you have not experienced totality, get yourself in there. I think the next one is Australia 2028. I'm planning to go.
You know that I have experienced a total eclipse many times. In fact, I would say maybe at least 293 times, because every week we podcast is a total eclipse of the heart for you.
It's just so heartwarming there, Steven. I don't really know how to take that. So you know what, Steven? We got a great show. We got a lot to talk about. We got a little bit more than normal to talk about. So why don't we just get into the Better Podnerings?
Here at Better Podcasting, we are not good at taking feedback. This is something that we've established many, many times. Somebody wants to criticize us, and we're going to take it to heart. We're going to cry about it. We're going to get upset. And then eventually we're going to realize that you were right. And so this first thing we want to talk about is on the heels of you telling us how wrong we were and us saying you were right. It's all about the podcast media host criteria that we've been evaluating. We've had some more reflection on other points, right, SP?
Yeah, well, in this case, it wasn't other people telling us. It was just me going, oh, yeah, this should have been in there. Anyway, there's a couple of things that we haven't been evaluating that I find myself now, maybe not today, but, in a future episode, it's going to be important. So we're going to start throwing these in there at least. And the first one is the ability to return a published episode back to draft. Now, why is this? Why didn't you just delete it? Well, first of all, you might want to keep the stats. And second of all, you might have the possibility of maybe keeping it available to publish it in the future again sometime. And this was huge back in the day when you had a limited amount of upload into your podcast media host provider. It's a little less so today, but it's still relevant with some of the podcast media host providers. In any event, I think this is a criteria we should add. And Steven, we haven't talked about this before, but what do you think?
I agree. This is something that I actually, I have two thoughts on. The first is that I make mistakes all the time. And I have to say that this is a pain when there is no draft, because I will go and I will post something and I'll quickly realize, oh crap, I've made a mistake. And often it's before it really gets downloaded. It's like as soon as I hit publish. And where this draft is not possible, I have to go and delete the whole post. And so then quickly get it out of the feed as opposed to just putting it back to draft where it is possible. The second thing I love about this is I think we should call this our Kurt Russell criteria because it's backdraft.
Okay, you got me there. Okay, the second one that I thought of was the ability to reorganize your posts. And what do I mean by that? You can backdate an existing published episode. It's an easy way to mess your RSS feed around a little bit and then just put one post in front of the other. And this could come in handy if you've ever mistakenly deleted a podcast. Then you're like, oh, wow, I deleted that. and I need to go republish that, but I don't want to republish it today. I want to republish it to where it was published originally 3 months ago. So maybe you want to do that, or maybe you want to reorganize your back catalog outside of the seasons capability, which is another thing that we should talk about is seasons. But I think the ability to backdate a published post is probably something that I just take for granted, and why I didn't put it in the criteria to begin with. Stephen, what do you think about it?
Yeah, this can come up, especially if you are doing organization, like you say. That it's easy. I think sometimes importing too can lead to this if there is by chance a mistake in the import process, and you might want to do this. So yeah, it's a great thought.
And the next one is actually the seasons, which is the same sort of thought. Is if you're actually publishing in seasons, you want to have the ability to publish in seasons. And some podcast media host providers don't provide that. I didn't realize that until I got to the point I'm like, oh, well, maybe not. So I think seasons would fit in there too.
Yeah, I would have assumed everybody would have, but in modern podcast times, I think that might actually be an indicator of whether the host is living in modern times or is a little bit dated, because there is a lot of seasons accepted now in podcasting. A lot of consumers of podcasts expect that now because big budget productions operate that way often. So I think I can't believe we missed this. We should be ashamed of ourselves. I suggest we give ourselves some lashings.
I mean, I'm already ashamed of myself every week, so I don't know how different this would be. But I think that these would be pass fail basically for us in the future. And if we run across something that's not there, we can adjust accordingly in the future. We'll go back and with the ones that we are kept on our list, basically, then we might have to discriminate between them in the future if they don't have these. But I think they all do. But I just a little spoiler for an upcoming episode. There's stuff out there that does not really account for this. And I will take exception to the one thing that you said about living in the past. I think these are people that don't understand podcasting. So they're not living in the past. They just don't understand podcasting.
Fair enough. That could be. If you didn't know this, we do stream this show when we record live on Wednesdays, usually at 4:15 p.m. Pacific time. That's 7:15 p.m. Eastern over at betterpodcasting.com/live. And in our chat room, we have Damian that makes a really good point about the seasons. He actually says seasons was made standard by Apple years ago. So,
well, the tag was made standard, but you don't necessarily have to have the tag. It's just a namespace, I guess, within the original RSS that's there. Is that the right term to use, namespace?
I
know. That's podcasting 2.0, whatever. It's been in there. You might not have it and it'll be just fine. So let's move on to the next thing, talking about Apple. Are you ready to move on?
I am.
So we're going to talk about a continuing subject that just won't go away. It's the Apple Podcast search of the different fields. This is due to a couple of episodes ago. We reported on this OSHA, that's AUSHA press release that says, yeah, you can advance in different categories in your search by putting keywords in these fields. And then Mr. Walsh from Libsyn, who's VP over there at Libsyn, he did some testing, which they still haven't addressed the terms of service issue, by the way, of whether that was technically legal or not for them to fool around with podcasts that aren't theirs or if they had permission to. But anyway, he made some discoveries that he said, no, I debunked this. Well, I guess in the feed, and this came up in our Discord server again, so it's not like Stephen and I are actively, searching around Libsyn for this, but in our Discord server, we have a couple of listeners that said, hey, they had an update. So basically, Rob Walsh went to Podcast Evolutions, and then Apple told him, you better check again. So he came back and he performed the same sort of test. I don't know if he used his own shows or if he used other shows. He wasn't clear on that. In the episode, there was a transcript that was posted on our Discord server. So he says that, yes, they actually are searched. So this is from the transcript. So I searched again for that slug, and there are now 3 results. The first 2 were around the title. One was for the title, and one was for the author field. The third result was from a show I had not added the slug to in any field, not in the description. Nowhere did I add it in, or did you add it? But Apple did. They added it in the transcription. They did it for this podcast, the feed. Oh my God. So now when I search for that slug, the feed, which is their podcast over at Libsyn, the official podcast over there, also shows up. So we were right originally in our determination. And I still have the same questions. I have the same questions over exactly, what terms were used in OSHA's determinations. I also have the same concerns for hobby podcasters. What comes up still today in our Discord server and on our podcasting is, can I podcast anonymously? And I'm here to tell you, if it's searchable, if it's in the transcript and it's searchable, you are putting yourself at risk by doing that. That's the flag that I'm throwing up here. Also, I'm throwing up the flag of make sure you have proper key terms in the different spaces in your post. He does go on to say the metadata is more important than the actual transcript. So you might want to have the keywords in your metadata versus in the transcript, but they are there. And he also doesn't know if the transcript or the metadata eventually is going to be more important for search. These are all questions that all of us have. How can we be more discoverable? How can we get our content out there to people that want to hear us? So I'm going to be looking for more information, not necessarily from the feed, but anywhere else that I can get it as well, as to how important some of these fields are, as well as the transcript when it comes to discoverability.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. It's not the first time that there's been something misreported and then a rediscovery like this. This probably won't be the last time. It's the nature of tests. Sometimes they don't go so well, and then you have to validate your tests again, sort of thing. The other thing I think is worth considering as well is just the general information in the podcast sphere. I think it's something that's important to remember that the podcast sphere is always evolving, and Libsyn's position in the podcast sphere is very different now than it used to be. And so there could be a difference in information that they're getting. Before, it might have been because they were, one of very few media hosts. It was very quick to get new information and reliably validate things. And now that sphere is watered down. There's a lot more media hosts. So perhaps, there's Spotify now, like, look what they've done in there. So, there might be a change in where the information's being relayed to, which providers are getting priority on some of this information, and how certain media hosts maybe are theoretically even treated by certain podcatchers and stuff. We don't know. I'm not saying that is definitive. I'm just saying that, the sphere has changed. And so I think it's reasonable to assume that Libsyn's position in the podcast media host sphere is very different now than it used to be.
All right, we're going to move on to the next Podnering point, and that is Steven's loyalty. Steven, are you loyal to any of your podcast tools?
I suppose I could be loyal, because when I log into the iZotope portal, I have a section in there that is called loyalty offers. And before I go into that, I should explain. There's a series of plugins called iZotope, and specifically, we're talking today about the iZotope products that's called RX. And there is 3 different tiers of the iZotope RX package. There is, I forgot the bottom one is, then there's standard, which is the middle, and then
Elements.
There's elements. Thank you. iZotope's RX Elements is the lowest, standard is the middle, advanced is the highest at different price points. And so this is a series of plugins that you and I both have used for a very, very long time, along with many other podcasters that we know, and they're part of our post-production process. Well, if you log into the iZotope portal, if you are an iZotope customer and have paid for a product, you will probably see there's a loyalty offers section in there where you're offered discounted rates for certain products. And it's made the discovery here that there is a deal going on right now for upgrading to RX10. The current version of iZotope's RX suite is number 10. And if you go in there, you'll see. And the way that they do their pricing on all of this is they base it off of what you own. So if you are somebody that owns Elements, they'll give you a price to upgrade to 10 elements. So let's say you own RX 7 elements, they'll give you a price to upgrade to RX 10 elements, and they'll also give you a price to upgrade even further, so maybe to standard or in advance, and it's a more increased price. And if you're contrary somebody who is up a package, they'll give you different prices. So if, for example, somebody who has RX Elements 7 will have a higher price to upgrade to RX 10 standard than somebody that owns RX 7 standard, because they're already at that middle tier. Well, we made a discovery in there that this deal is pretty good right now. It's a pretty good deal that's being offered, in our opinion. And there's currently a promotion as of when we record this right now on April 10th, where if you upgrade to RX 10, it looks like they are giving a free upgrade to RX 11 when it comes out. This is something we noticed on their website, and we didn't see it in the loyalty offer section, but I did see it on a third-party website called Audio Deluxe, which also sells these upgrades. It said that that was included. So I thought I'd reach out and I'd ask if the loyalty offer portal does include that. And the response I got, and this is the response that I got, so don't shoot the messenger if this does not pan out. The response that I got was, "Hello, Steven. Thank you for reaching out to iZotope by Native Instruments. Any purchase of RX 10 placed within the pre-sale period, whether it's through your loyalty offers or the official price page, is eligible for a free upgrade to the equivalent version of RX 11. So feel free to proceed," end quote. So that's the response I got to the ticket, asking whether the offers in loyalty would also get the free RX 11 upgrade. So I'm going to do it.
I have RX 9, and I've been waiting for this deal to happen for quite some time because I want to maintain currency in my plugins, but I don't want to spend all that much money. So I was waiting until the tail end of RX 10, and I took the $99 upgrade, loyalty upgrade, to get to RX 10. I will let everybody know if I get the free upgrade to RX 11. I did it through the iZotope website. There was no mention of RX 11 being free. So I am fair enough. I'm confident enough. I'm good enough to take that upgrade from 9 to 10 at $100. And then I will hopefully get 11. If I don't, that's okay. I think this is a good step forward in modernizing my tools, keeping current and that sort of thing. I will say, if you're listening to this in the future and you're like, "Oh, I've missed out on this," well, that's fine. Just wait until the next cycle and you get to the end. And I started on Elements. I believe it was Elements 4. I don't remember the exact version, but I started on Elements, and then 7 came out. And so I went with RX 7 standard at the time, and I stayed on 7 for a while. When 9 came out, there was a revolutionary upgrade that occurred. So I got the same sort of loyalty upgrade to 9, and I got new tools for that. And so when this came around, I'm like, okay, I haven't upgraded my software in a while. I'm still using the Vegas 19. So maybe I need to start refreshing some things. And RX, the iZotope, or iZotope RX 10 was the next upgrade for me. So I took it. So I'll let everybody know. But if you're listening in the future and you just got in on Elements, then eventually you can upgrade to standard in a future evolution. I would highly recommend you do, because these plugins have been lifesavers for the most part. They have kept my sanity as I am editing to get better audio out for my listeners. So that's just a little tidbit, a little tip for the future for you.
I'm still on 7, and that's just because I don't know, I just kind of forgot to upgrade along the way. But I will be very curious to see going up to 10 if the noise reduction's any better. The noise reductions is good, absolutely. But I feel like the Waves NS1 is a little bit better, and that's the one I use. But I want to dump Waves. I want to get rid of Waves, and so that's pretty like. There's alternatives I can use for any other Waves ones that I currently use, but the noise reduction is the one there that I'm hoping when I go up to 10, I'll be like, okay, yeah. This can make me get rid of that.
On the standard level, there's D-Click, there's D-Breath, there's just a bunch of plugins that are included in that suite that are going to be very useful for the hobby podcaster.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that the Waves are bad. I'm just saying if you don't know what you're doing at all and you have a DAW that's capable of taking VST plugins, then, you know, the iZotope RX series is a good one to go. Well, Stephen, we also are moving ahead into YouTube Music.
Yeah, today we had on our Discord our friend Chris Farrell make a post, and he had pointed out that there was apparently a Reddit post that came out from the podcast team behind YouTube Music. It said, "Hi, I'm Emma, and I work at YouTube Music with a focus on podcasts. I know a lot of the conversations here are music focused, but I've seen a lot of discussion about podcasts on YouTube Music too. I want to make sure you know that we see your feedback, and we're doing a lot on the podcast front. You can now sort a podcast episode from newest to oldest, oldest to newest, most popular or default. If you're a listener outside of the United States with podcasts in your library, you'll see podcasts on your home screen, including a new recommended shows shelf. This is already available to US users, and improved search results now make it easier to find YouTube podcasts you love. This is only the beginning, and the podcast team is working on a lot more improvements. Let me know if you'd like more podcast updates here," end quote. And all I'm going to say to this is nice to see that they are hearing that the current version of YouTube Music Podcasts has some features that are still hoping to be implemented. I'll say that nicely. But I also think that this is exactly why a lot of people feel that YouTube Music Podcasts feel very rushed as a podcast player. And I just don't get why Google continues to release new podcast versions that are half-baked. They should have enough information by now to be able to release a fully functional thing. Google Podcast was the exact same way.
I put very little cred into this at this moment. I could be forced to eat my words in the future, but Google and podcasting just hasn't gotten along very well. They're preying on the average podcaster that might not know a lot about the space to say, "Oh, on YouTube, you take advantage of the search engine on YouTube and everybody's on YouTube." Yeah, everybody's on YouTube because they're watching the videos. Everybody's not on YouTube necessarily to listen to music or podcasts. So I think the bang for the buck isn't going to be as great as people think. I have been on YouTube. I actually just got a premium membership, I don't know, about 4 months ago when I got sick of the ads finally. And so I've been on YouTube for a very long time. I've watched sailing YouTube channels for a long, long time. I have yet to be served with a static image podcast recommendation on the YouTube player, except for a couple weeks ago. I finally got my first one. It was a recommendation. It's because I was watching the Apple TV Plus series Masters of the Air. And so I was watching some background information of it. For those of you that don't know, I am Air Force former veteran, and I like watching stuff regarding air power and World War II and that sort of stuff. And I finally got the official Apple TV Plus podcast that went along with the show served up to me as a recommendation. That's the only podcast, the only static image podcast that's ever come up. And why? Well, it has Tom Hanks on it. That's why. That's probably why it was recommended to me. And I listened to it. I did. I had it on in the background as I was doing stuff here on the computer, but it's not like I have been served up ad after ad after ad of audio only podcasts. It's just that one recommendation. So I could be forced to eat my words eventually, but I just don't see this as the great panacea of the future if you do a static image podcast. I think there's a little bit more bang for the buck if you're doing what Steven and I do and serve a dynamic video up, even if it's just talking heads as we're doing right here, even if it's VTubing, even if it's maybe even a scene in the background. I think that's a little less relevant because it's not directly applicable to the subject that you're talking about. I think a dynamic video is always going to beat a static image in the future. We'll see what the podcasts do on YouTube Music, because that is, by definition, I think, something that you listen to. So we'll see. But I just want to get that out there. If I haven't said it already, I just wanted to say that now, that if YouTube pushes this as hard as they can, I think they are, I still think it's going to fail because the algorithm is not going to serve up the podcasts that are audio only.
I'd be curious as well what the former Google Podcast users, the ones that listen through podcasts through Google Podcasts, where they're migrating to. I just wish we had some feedback later in our Better Podback to talk about that.
It's time to return to our roots in homemade radio days and dial our podcasts in using some transistors. This week, we insert our double D batteries and switch the power on to Transistor.fm and apply our podcast media host criteria to that service. Now, according to online information about the company, Transistor.fm was founded in 2017. It's based in Chicago, currently employs 6 people, and has 26,000 podcasts that it hosts. The founders, John Buda and Justin Jackson, have documented their journey as a podcast. It's called Bootstrap, which can be found at saas.transistor.fm. And I have not listened to Bootstrap, but I have wanted to ever since I ran into it. I have run across Justin on r/podcasting. He's over there and has been there for years under a username u/SpankyMustard. However, that's the extent of the relationship I have between Transistor and myself. It's just passing Justin on the subreddit as far as our history goes. Now, to date, before our research for this episode, neither of us have any firsthand experience using Transistor.fm with hosting any of our shows. And for this episode, I did use one of the 2 audio podcasts that Podfaded after 2017 that the owner has allowed to Podfade and given me the express permission to use for these tests. I imported the show from Buzzsprout to Transistor and continued the show by uploading a new episode. Now, Stephen, what is your experience that you used for this evaluation?
Why would I change it up at this point? I just created a brand new account again from scratch, created a new podcast on there, and when I went through, I saw that there was a 14-day trial possibility, but you do have to enter a credit card to get that 14-day trial. Setup was really simple to set up a brand new podcast. It was very guided, I felt. And as I went through the sign up, basically there was 4 options presented: to create a new podcast, to import a podcast, to create a private podcast feed, or to create a free podcast website. We'll come back to that in a minute. And both of us, as we went through this, we did look at the different plans that were available, because like other media hosts, there's different options. And so we thought we would look at the $19 per month, quote, starter plan, end quote. There's no free plan on Transistor, but the next step up was $49 per month for the professional plan. And we thought for a hobby podcaster, probably a little bit too high for where they'd be looking, at least to start. So we thought we'd start with the $19 per month. Now, I just want to ask this question. Why is the jump so high on so many of these? It seems like there's a missed opportunity to get the people who are willing to spend a little bit more, but not a lot more. Like, if you put an extra little dangling feature there for me, a little tease to say, come on, give me $10 more, you might do it. I feel like the jump, that gap, is missing some revenue there, but...
Yeah, we'll talk about the affordability later, but using that as a basis, now we'll continue with our format of discussing the highlights of the service, the neutral points, and the shortcomings of the Transistor.fm podcast media hosting service from the lens of a hobby podcaster.
301. Let's start with the 301 redirect in the highlight section.
I was like, did I say it wrong again? No, 301, because I have said 401 before, by the way. As always, we're going to start with the RSS redirect. Does it have a 301? Yes, it does. It's found on the RSS feed tab in the settings and bundled with a bunch of different customizable options. Is it too many customizable options? Maybe. But for anyone that knows what we're doing and experience with podcasting, they'll be able to effectively manage and customize their RSS feed a bit. Settings like disabling Apple's episode numbering or making the show on complete in Apple Podcasts. You can actually say this show is complete and it's done. Or you can turn on and off a lock toggle to prevent the show from being stolen and imported into another hosting platform service without your okay. And also clear directions on limiting the total number of episodes in the feed. Stephen, I don't know about you, but when we were starting podcasting, it was like this elusive thing. Why do I only have 10 episodes in my feed? Well, it's because you've only limited it to 10 in your RSS feed. Well, this at least gives you the directions to do that. Overall, we'll call this a giant win because not only can you redirect your RSS feed, but there's a bunch of options on the RSS feed available. Now, importing the podcast was pretty easy, and I was able to transition from Buzzsprout despite some extra steps required. The first step is to sign up for the plan and the 14-day free trial. This does include inputting your credit card information, as Steven said before. The second step includes search for the show, either by name or the RSS feed. For some reason, the name search wasn't working, so I had to resort to the RSS search, which did indeed work. And then there were 2 Buzzsprout RSS feed specific issues that Transistor identified by pop-up and helped correct. The first was the RSS feed was locked by Buzzsprout. So yay on Buzzsprout for having a locked RSS feed. So I had to go in and unlock the RSS feed at Buzzsprout. And the next was having an email in the RSS feed. If you remember our review of Buzzsprout, it does not include an email address by default. There's 2 different options you can choose in Buzzsprout. One is turning it on temporarily for 48 hours or permanently. I turned it on temporarily. It really didn't matter because I was importing the feed over. As soon as Transistor was able to see that, which I believe was about 15 minutes, I was able to get the feed imported into Transistor. And then there was a website page setup, and we'll go into that later, but the show was imported. Now, while we're on the subject, there is that new RSS thing that was in here, and I don't remember it being on any of the other services that we reviewed. So, Steven, what was that?
That was the ability to make a private podcast, is what they said. So I honestly don't know a lot about that, but that is a feature that's on there, and I agree. We haven't seen that to date. So you can make yourself a private podcast, including at that $19 per month plan. This is, of course, in addition to the ability to create a new show, because that is an option in there as well, to create a show and also make a private podcast. Along similar lines, returning to the Transistor website, it does provide 4 different themed options should you choose to add the website component to there. You can also choose your own subdomain, for example, yourhobbypodcast.transistor.com. The websites also have different customizable options, allowing you to brand that as you need. That includes things like header image, social sharing image, and a custom fav icon, or fave icon if you'd prefer. That's the little icon that shows up next to your address bar. And you have the ability to just blanket toggle MP3 downloads on or off for individual episodes, or for the whole website if you would like. So you can do that just through the options if you choose to set up a Transistor website.
There is an embed player, and it's pretty decent. There's the ability to customize the embed for the whole show or just by individual episodes. There's 10 preset themes, but full customization of the background and primary colors are available. Additionally, you can enable the subscribed links and the MP3 downloads. Also, there is an option to import your show into a free Transistor podcast website. I didn't explore this in the evaluation of transistor.fm, but it is available if you have a feed and you just want a website out there. I actually don't know. It's free, but I don't know what options are available in the free version of the website or not. Now, Transistor does allow for multiple RSS feeds on their $19 a month starter plan, but it comes at a price that we'll talk about later. And yeah, that's not so good. And for us, a little foreshadowing there. Now, the mobile interface does seem optimized for the environment, and it also seems like it's full service. So it doesn't keep options back from the full web interface, including an RSS redirect. Transistor provides a way to integrate with Patreon and Apple Podcasts subscriptions, and they do have a distribution interface that looks pretty comprehensive to most major directories. In my case, the show was already being published to Amazon Music, but to help enable the web integration within Transistor, I chose to submit to Amazon Music just to see what happened. Amazon Music actually accepted the destination, and I checked Amazon Music not only right then, but in the next few days. It didn't seem like the feed was duplicated over there. So Amazon Music must have said, okay, this is where the feed's coming from now. I will then give that information to Transistor. The Transistor destination page was then updated to be able to include the directory URL for the show on Amazon Music. And the destinations page is divided into popular directories, podcast search directories, and then other apps and aggregators. We like how there is a clear division between the different types of locations they're talking about, as compared to some of the others where it's not clear what's a true hook and what's more a manual work related.
Along similar lines to your destinations, they actually have an integrations page, which is a little bit different. The integrations page has information about your external website analytics. If you're using something like Fathom or Google Analytics, you can integrate that to your website stats there. You also have a section for mail lists. So if you need to set up a mail list, you can do that through there. There's also the information for Patreon and Apple Podcast subscription. And there is a social media component on there for Twitter, at least on the $19 a month plan. And if you go up, there's another option or two available if you increase your plan. But I have to say, I thought this was kind of refreshing to see some features there that weren't just directly podcast-specific features, but they're features that podcasters might use. For example, that mailing list component. There's some value in that.
Yeah. Now, neither of us have noted any reliability issues with Transistor. Nothing that we can think of in social media, nothing that I've seen on our podcasting. So for reliability, we'll put that in the highlights. Transistor also allows for unlimited team members. Unlimited team members. Not just 5, not 3, not 2. Unlimited.
Now, while Transistor does not offer a portal to help add ID3 tags to the published file, they do add ID3 tags if they aren't there. Specifically, they'll add episode title, podcast title, author, publishing year, episode number. But there is a huge footnote to this that we'll come back to in the next section. What about the stats, though, SP?
As far as the analytics go on Transistor, it's a nice clean layout. You have the average downloads per episode by time period. You have estimated subscribers, listener trends, podcast players, devices, operating systems, and platforms of global listener locations. You do also have episode breakdowns that you can click into with individual episode breakouts, including a compare with other episodes through a drop down. Now, I'm going to throw the caveat out here that the statistics are not IAB compliant. We've talked before about how we think they may or may not be relevant as things go forward. But we also liked how the graphs felt modern, interactive, and responsive. The functionality of the graphs are probably one of the most modern ones that we've evaluated to date. And basically, they feel like they were created now, not many years ago. Overall, they're acceptable and we like them, so we're going to give them a passing grade.
Help! No, really help! Well, the help section anyways.
Oh.
Yeah, let's talk about the help section on Transistor, because putting aside content reliability in that help section, and we will come back to that again, maybe related to the previous thing, it is really easy to find articles in their help section, and there's several articles where there are videos or maybe images in there to help further support the article. Videos are really a very modern way of learning, especially for some younger demographics. It's so easy for people to just punch into YouTube, how do I build a deck? Find the shortest video and build a poorly built deck.
And lastly, let's talk about that elusive download button. If you've heard any of our recent episodes, you know we're fixated on a download button. This is basically the ability to easily download the file of your show. Well, guess what? Transistor passes this with flying colors. And we're going to spell colors with a British U just to make it even better. Is it, Stephen, a British U or a Canadian U?
Let's be honest. We stole everything from the British up in Canada here.
You're still part of the Commonwealth, right?
No comment.
Because on the episode page, there is actually a download MP3 button. And not just that, but as we mentioned, there's also the ability to have a download button on the embed player. So thank you, Transistor, for saving our sanity with the download.
Now let's move on to the neutral zone. This is some of the neutral hot points that we think. We'll start with our views about the Transistor affordability in comparison to several other services that we reviewed around the $19 a month price point. It seems like Transistor feels high for the $19 per month price point for hobby podcasters when you consider some of the features and restrictions that we're going to come back to. Do you get unlimited shows and RSS feeds? Yes, you do. Do you get unlimited team members and the elusive auto post to Twitter? Yes. But we will combine our view with this on the next criteria that we're going to talk about, the download limits, which kind of take away from that feel of affordability. Now, before we talk specifically about that, let's just make it clear we do firmly believe that media hosts should have some form of limits in place. It's a smart business move for them to protect themselves financially.
Many of the media hosts we've discussed to date focus on limiting the file perspective, such as the maximum amount that you can upload or the maximum bit rate, etc. Transistor primarily places its limits on the traffic. Transistor has a very limiting 20,000 downloads per month on their plan at $19 a month. Let's put this limit into context. 2 shows at 2,000 downloads per week per episode would bust this in a 5-week month. If you have more than 2,000 downloads, you're going to bust this. But the average podcaster at 150 downloads per episode would be fine with 5 podcast episodes a week with 5 shows. Yeah, that's 5 shows posted every day for 5 days a week. That's 25 total episodes per week. This would be even true for a fictitious 5 full work week month, which would never happen, but it would be true for a total of 18,750 downloads per month. So whether or not this will work, we'll leave it up to you, but we find it overly limiting, and at best we'll give it both the affordability and data limitations a rating of 3 out of 5 for this. Now, Transistor, while allowing unlimited uploads, does cap the file size at 1 gigabyte. Yeah, it's more than enough right now for most hobby podcasters, in our opinions. And quite frankly, this seems like a let's ensure we're not being abused limit. It's that high. For our criteria of company health, we see no indication that the company is in trouble. However, it is a small company with only 6 employees, as I mentioned before. They also have documenting their journey through the podcast Bootstrap, which I have not listened to, but it might give more insights into the company health. Still, it's a small company and one to keep your eye on in the future for health. But I want to stress this. There's no cause for alarms noted anywhere in Transistor's health. It's a company that's going to be around for a while, at least. It's not for sale, and there's no other trouble noted. Now, Transistor's customer support has not been noted for having any issues. The co-founder, Justin, has been pretty active, as I mentioned before, over on our podcasting over the years, and it's been fine over there. Now, Transistor's dashboard has a very busy graphical user interface. There's a lot of fields crammed onto each page or tab. The overall feel seems optimized for the mobile experience. There's no iOS app that we know of on the Apple mobile devices. On the other hand, the interface feels very complete. Some of the past media hosts that we've evaluated have felt a little like you had to hunt for features, and in some cases, the features weren't even there. While Transistor does feel busy when you navigate to a page, you can easily find the information that you need. It's also very fast to load pages, especially in the amount of content that we're going through. And we'll also throw in here, there's a couple of fields that were a bit of a surprise. There was a link to the YouTube video URL, if applicable, and you can assign people to the episode. And you can automatically add ID3 version 2 chapters to episode show notes. These are features and fields that are great to have. We would like to see most media hosts have features that are more like this than less, right? And however, the layout does feel a little bit daunting at times with the organization of data. There's a lot there. We'd say the field layout feels like it's geared more towards an experienced podcaster who has familiarity with the different potential fields, but the busyness might confuse a new podcaster. Perhaps they need to add a simple view or something in there, but overall, it's a pass.
In the file integrity realm, let's start off by addressing this, giving you information, what they say on that help documentation that I talked about a minute ago. Transistor says, quote, "When you upload your audio files to Transistor, we won't change your ID3 tags or downsample your audio. If your file doesn't have ID3 tags, we will add them for you when you upload. they aren't already present, we add ID3 tags for episode title, podcast title, author, and publishing year, end quote. Now, despite this, we both experienced the same situation. We uploaded files that had ID3 tags completed, and we had different information that were listed in the different fields that they referenced there. Well, Transistor ended up overwriting the podcast ID field, the release time, the title field, and the album field, even though they were already completed. So they say that they won't adjust those if they're completed, but in our experience, there were a couple that were automatically overwritten. We also found that the file was renamed. So I made my episode that I put in there called Testing the Stuff. It's a very enthralling episode called, quote, Testing the Stuff. And the file that I actually uploaded the Better Podcasting episode. It was called Better Podcasting 292.mp3. And on the other side of the download, I got testing-the-stuff.mp3. That's what I got.
Well, however, it's worth noting that the file did not appear to be re-encoded as far as we can see. However, the bit count was a little bit different because the ID3 tag changes. So how can we say for sure? Probably note that it was only a small byte count difference, but we do have to say it's a little uneasy for us, given that they don't change. They say they don't change the ID3 tags, but they did. It takes a little bit of credibility away from where they say they won't re-encode. And while we're getting all techie, let's talk file types. The file types allowed include MP3, M4A, AIFF, WAV, MP4, and MOV. But anything other than an MP3 file will be re-encoded to an MP3. Although we'd like to see them not re-encode AAC and WAV files, it's worth noting that they actually allow MP4 and MOV uploads, and that definitely could save some video podcasters some export time by just uploading those files. So some pros, some cons. That's why we're talking about the file types in the neutral section.
Now let's move on to the shortcomings. There are a few that we wanted to note for Transistor, and the first that we want to mention is coming back to that complexity factor. This deserved a call out on its own because this is something that the dashboard and the general field of the navigation of your podcast feels like it is positioned for that more seasoned podcaster, and it might be pretty daunting for new podcasters. We don't want to take away from the fact that, honestly, it was refreshing to see a bunch of the fields that we hoped were available in some of these past media hosts that we talked about. But the way it's laid out, the way that it feels mandatory for everything, just comes off complex, I think, for new podcasters. We've seen other media hosts in our evaluation that did a better job of minimizing the impact of some of these extra fields. And the fact that Transistor has so many to their benefit, I think it would benefit them to work on how they present these fields. Most pages just have a plethora of different fields and boxes in there, and it almost feels like the pages themselves are very crammed. It's great to see them have these, but please put some more thought in how they can maybe make that more inclusive for an inexperienced podcaster so they don't go to sign up and go, I don't know how to, but I'm just not going to podcast.
I could see that. So moving on to the next criteria, Transistor does not include a recording or editing solution. And as I mentioned, I believe last time, I don't think anybody does after Spotify for podcasters got rid of there. And then other than the transcription namespace tag, Transistor does not appear to support Podcasting 2.0. It's worth noting that Transistor does have an AI service integration to create transcripts. We'd also like to point out that according to the website podcasting2.org, Transistor is listed to support some features. However, we saw no mention of Podcasting 2.0 in the help, and we didn't see anything in our RSS feeds. So perhaps Podcasting 2.0 is going to come pretty soon, okay, to Transistor, or perhaps that podcasting2.org's website data just has incorrect data. We don't know. While Transistor does accept those video RAW files that we talked about, they will auto re-encode them to MP3, so there's no video podcasting support. And at the starter $19 a month plan, there is no dynamic audio insertion. And then other than the hooks to Patreon and Apple podcasting service, Transistor does not offer any additional paid subscriptions or memberships within its own service.
In summary, Transistor does have some positives like the multiple RSS feeds, unlimited uploads, and unlimited team members, but a few areas have to be caveated, like the overwriting of the ID3 tags and the re-encoding of all of the files to MP3 if they're not an MP3 uploaded. But for us personally, our personal evaluation, part of this exercise is for us, moving off of Libsyn. For us, the download limits are something that we do have issue with. Yes, the 20,000 download per month would satisfy many hobby podcasters, but we see it as sort of a cap of a growth for potential. That's sort of the way we see that being applied. No one likes to be told that their baby isn't going to go anywhere. This might not be the best model to attract everybody who does want to grow their podcast or just don't want to worry about, hey, what if I suddenly spike? So for us personally, our decision, this is something we've talked over the years. This has been a showstopper for us with this type of limit imposed.
Neither of us are a fan of this model, and it feels like you're giving the limit control to somebody else. You have no say in how this plays out. With the file size limits, you do have a say. Either you do a shorter episode, you cut down the bit rate, you make the file smaller somehow. You have the say in that. But with the downloads, you don't have a say in that. Of course, we recognize that we are much more passionate about this than others may be. So while Transistor is off of our short list for moving our podcasts onto, there's a lot that has to offer to others, and it may make a home for you and your podcast.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
I'm beginning, SP, to think that we are just hard done by. That's what I'm beginning to think, because we had Jondrew Says come into our Discord this past week and validate our feelings of sorrow. He said, it is wild hearing about all the issues y'all have encountered with these mixers. I'm sorry you have been dealing with all these nightmares, end quote. So clearly, we're just terrible with mixers.
We are. And I've teased an update for mine for a while, and I'll just give a little 2-second thing. I have experienced some issues on startup still. I have gone in and I've done the updates that Rode has requested. If it gets much worse, I'll have to turn it in. And I just hope it can, stay alive until the next generation of mixers come out. I would hate to have to buy another one because I have this here. So I'm not going to send it in at this point. It's working for the most part. It's that startup and shutdown issues that I've talked about before. And I owe Rode an email on that as well. So Rode, if you happen to be listening to this, I'm going to keep it for now. And we'll just go from there. But having Jondrew come in and say it's a nightmare for everything that you guys have experienced, yeah, it has. I think I had higher hopes for the DLZ Creator XS, Stephen, that you brought into your studio. And then when you immediately said, there is a sound in my headphones that I can't, I'm like, you're kidding me. Everybody has said it is the audiophile's dream of the mixer recorders out there. And then for you to have to go through that, I was like, oh. So we're hopeful. We talked last time about our criteria for mixer recorders. We're hopeful that some of our criteria will be listened to, and we look forward to the next generation of mixer recorders. Whether it comes next year, the year after, at some point in time, this tech will be refreshed.
And I just want to clarify, the whine was not in the headphones. The whine was on the actual unit, which is something that made it even worse for me because I usually have my mixer going, like I work at home most of the time or the majority of the week. And so I couldn't imagine having that whining as I'm sitting there working right next to me. I couldn't do it. So it was worse.
Again, it was just your particular unit, right?
Sure
so I mean, you get another one and it might have worked for you, but then you found out that the NDI security and you're like, no way, I'm not going to do this. All right. So we're going to move on to the next feedback. It's actually from Damian. It's about RedCircle. And he says, specifically generating a video after uploading an episode. I haven't clicked the box to generate a video at the same time as an upload. Anyway, when you click the generate video button, there is no feedback that it's worked. No like timer or loading bar or email or pop-up that says it's working and to come check back later. I actually got rate limited the first time I went to make a video because I kept clicking the button thinking it wasn't working. If I recall correctly, even when you do figure that part out, it doesn't send you an email to tell you or your video is ready. You just have to go back at a later date and you can download it. Also, tied to the rate limit thing, I do believe there's a cap on how many videos you can get generating at once. It will eventually tell you you can't do that anymore, which is why I don't have them even generated for the whole show yet. Unquote, Damian. Okay. Yep. Good to know about RedCircle. RedCircle is on our short list, and it's good to know about the video generation. I don't think that'll affect Steven and I too much.
Oh,
because
it absolutely will, because why would anybody want to actually see us? I was going to go just replace them all with a static image. That's what I was going to
do. Of course you were. We already have the dynamic video. Although there's been a couple of episodes, and I've asked you about it before. There's been a couple of episodes of Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the, which are on the GonnaGeek YouTube channel, that I'm like, oop, we lost the video. We don't have any video. And you're like, just go ahead and put the static image up there. But it's like 1 or 2 episodes out of what, 400. So it's not every week.
Well, moving on to our next piece of feedback, SP. There are 4 lights as well. There are 4 in a row that we're going to mention Waffles, because in the Discord, Waffles came in and said 3 episodes in a row that I get mentioned in. I like this. So of course we're going to mention this right now so you can have 4. And Damian comes back and he says, my 3rd co-host spot is feeling threatened, to which Waffles has encouraged a coup. He has now responded suggesting that they do a coup. So you know what? At this point, just send the phishing link to SP.
I'm fine for a coup. Matter of fact, you can have a coup in 2 weeks. How about that?
And also back to the whole Google podcast discussion, because we did actually have a bit of back and forth that came up in the heels of the link that Chris Farrell posted there about Google Podcasts. Chris Farrell started off by saying, not sure if anyone is using YouTube Music for podcasts in here. I am still happy with Pocket Cast myself. Now, I want to give backstory on here. Although Chris Farrell is a recent Mac convert as far as the machine goes, the main machine goes, he still uses a Pixel phone as his primary phone device. So that is something that he still uses that. And he's been a Pixel user for a very long time. So he is still in the Android ecosystem, and he apparently does not choose to use either, or didn't use the Google Podcast player, and now does not use YouTube Music Podcasts. We also had Anthony from Capes on the Couch respond saying, I switched to Pocket Cast because I needed something Android auto compatible, but I hate when Google kills off products like this. And Damian the DM said, they can pry Podcast Addict out of my cold dead hands. Almost got 400 days listened racked up in there.
That's a lot of days listening to podcasts. I will say I used Google Podcasts at work. It was an easy way for me to have podcasts up on different tabs. I just had to close them all. I believe yesterday went in and said Google Podcasts is not available anymore, and it hasn't been available for a week. And so I closed, I had 15 tabs open, one for each podcast. I know you don't have to do it, but I easily was able to check for new episodes that way. I cannot do the same thing with Google Music or YouTube Music, because we're extremely data limited on our machines that we can go out, and YouTube Music has a lot of that YouTube background to it, and it just makes it more difficult to use. I do have one tab open to YouTube Music, and it's constantly doing the check thing, and it's just not working the same as Google Podcasts, where that is a specific use case to me in a very data limiting environment. So if you happen to use YouTube Music, we would like to hear how your experience is. I know most people probably do it through an app, and that's not how I'm going to do that at work. I think I might have to switch over to Spotify, actually.
I have to say, I was liking Podcast Addict. I gave it a bit of a try. I quite like it. I did find something really weird come up with one of the episodes, because I always publish our episodes and then I go and I download them immediately and right away check to make sure they sound like they are fine. And I had one episode where I kind of was half expecting Damian to reach out, but it ended up being that it just showed a small little snippet of the episode. Like it never actually played, but it said, like, I think it was like 10 minutes or something. And I thought, okay, the file must be compromised or whatever, right? Like, and so then I just quickly hit up a whole bunch of other things. I tried it on the computer. I tried it through multiple different players, and it was all fine. So I don't know what bug that was, but leave it to me, you know, with our history with mixers, to run into a bug. So I don't know.
Yeah. I've had that same thing happen on Overcast, because that's what the app that I use on my iPhone is, Overcast. I've had that same thing. I delete it and I re-download it. Yeah. Does it give a fake extra download to the podcaster that's doing it? Yeah, but it's only one, so it's no big deal. So I don't know if it's Overcast, the phone, the connection, whether it's through Wi-Fi or cellular service, or whether it's on the end of the media host provider or the CDN. I have no idea where it is. It'd be incredibly hard to debug for us to go through that. So as long as it works eventually, it's fine. The issue that I would have is if I find a corrupted file that I've downloaded and I'm in the middle of a flight somewhere, and I don't fly that much anymore. I used to fly all the time. But if I've downloaded something to my phone to consume while I'm on the flight as I'm working on something else, or maybe trying to sleep or something like that, then I'm not going to be able to listen to it because I can't download it again. And yeah, I know there's some flights that have data, but I don't know if that costs money anymore or not. I know some people were giving data away for free a while back. I don't know if I feel comfortable paying for data on a flight yet. Eventually I might get there. But anyway, I did
it once, and I think I just sent you a message, just playing around. I think I sent like a tiny, like a 512 kilobit per second speed test or something like that. I just remember it was a very short flight and it was a very low amount I had to pay, and it was worth the entertainment value.
With things like Starlink coming on board now, though, I don't know if it's going to be better and more capable and that sort of thing. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I could see running into that situation where I've downloaded a show into Overcast and I want to listen to it and I can't for whatever reason. I've also had the experience, I think it was with Better Podcasting. Maybe it was it was with the GonnaGeek show, where the actual image wouldn't download. The show played fine, but the image itself was corrupted. And I tried to delete it and re-download it, and the image was still corrupted.
That was just me hacking your phone.
Well, I mean, I give you the password, so I don't know why you hacked.
Well, thanks everybody who checked out this show. Thanks to everybody who comes to our Discord server. We love the conversation over there. And if you're not in our Discord server, we'd love to have you there. Go to betterpodcasting.com/Discord. And while you're in there, why don't you go to the GonnaGeek website? That's GonnaGeek.com. Lots of amazing geeky content on there. Awesome fellow hobby podcasters. Please check that all out and enjoy the geekery. And if you do like geekery, you should also make sure you check out the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. This is my favorite Marvel show. SP does that with his co-host over there.
Yeah, right now we're actually covering the X-Men 97 series. So if you watch the X-Men cartoon in the 90s, this is the continuation of it. They picked up right where they left off. I did not watch it in the 90s, so I didn't have that nostalgia feel to it, but I at least saw the story continue. So that was pretty cool. So we're doing that over there on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Stephen, next week here on Better Podcasting, we're going to get a little non-traditional. I don't know if you've taken a look at what's in our headlights here, but it's going to be different.
It will be. So come back for that. So for episode number 293 of Better Podcasting, I'm Steven saying it's going to make no sense, but I got a cat behind me right now. That's just for my son.
And I'm SP saying we'll see everybody next week. Catch you later. Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the GonnaGeek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen Jondrew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.